Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for another episode of I Only Ask Because. I'm your host Tony, and then we have Dr. E. I want to thank you for joining me once again. So let's get right into the topics of the day. So we've said this before in a previous episode, but Trump's saying that the 25% tariffs on basically the rest of North America, Canada, Mexico, they're going to take effect next week. And he's talking about an additional 10% tax on the Chinese imports that is coming. And again, we did touch on this last week, but I'm just wondering, what do you think is going to happen in terms of, I don't want to say necessarily the market, but just how we spend our money, how things will get more expensive, or maybe they'll decrease in price with these incoming tariffs?
Okay, first of all, I want to circle back because I think we forgot my question for today is was Maya Angelou correct when she stated people are afraid to be pried loose from their ignorance? I only asked because.
Okay. Hmm.
But to get back to your question, what do I think is going to happen in terms of economics? Because I feel like this is all related.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you look at the last 100 days, what we're seeing is a downward spiral in terms of what's going on with our society. And I know a lot of times you have to go 3 steps backwards to get 4 steps forward. And so I'm not questioning the process at all. What I'm seeing though is almost like a repeat of things we've already tried in the past that have not worked for us.
Yeah.
And so that makes me kind of wonder, you know, are we intentionally tanking our country? What's the motivation behind it? Because everything you just mentioned in terms of tariffs and increased tariffs has been shown economically to be bad business, right? So we can't point to any time in history where increasing tariffs for, against allies has actually helped us profit as a country. So I don't understand why anyone thinks this time will be different.
Okay. Well, I mean, you make a good point. Um, I do feel like the whole thing with China is also going to kind of bite us in the butt because even though they're not necessarily an ally, they're still somebody that we depend heavily on for resources, specifically electronics. Basically, everything that we use says made in China. So, I mean, it is kind of crazy, and that is going to come back on us one way or another. And then Mexico and Canada, I just feel like you have two countries that have always had their own kind of demons, their own issues, and we've just always kind of been there to, like, acquaintances almost. They're not necessarily our best friends. Canada a little bit more than Mexico, but it's always just been one of those things where, we're neighbors, so we don't want to be that neighbor that's always beefing, or you do one thing to me, and then I try and get back at you like in the movies or whatever. And I think that's really what you're starting to see, especially with Mexico since Trump's been in office, but even now with Canada, I think you're going to see that play out even more. But that's just my take on it. But going back to your question, because I did kind of get ahead of myself, I guess when you ask that, what can you kind of dive into that a little bit more, what you're asking?
Well, sure. I saw a post recently that used the word woke in quotations.
Mm-hmm.
And it was saying that, Maya Angelou, may she rest in peace, was ahead of her time because when she was asking that question, what she was really saying is, why is there resistance to facts that you were previously unaware of? Why is there resistance to people and cultures that you're not familiar with? Why is there this automatic resistance? And her take on that in this particular interview was because people are more comfortable staying in their ignorance, so staying in what they don't know, than venturing out and having to be really brave because they know they're about to be in uncharted waters in terms of information that they have. It to me, that's not really even a cultural or an ethnic or anything like that. To me, that's just a human response to the unknown. However, once you get past the whole, okay, I'm human, you're human, then we have the responsibility of being, I don't know, intelligent humans or empathetic humans or caring humans. And so human can be the baseline, but I don't think that we all should, ignore facts and information and just have knee jerk reactions.
Okay.
In terms of current events, the most recent thing I guess I've heard is the push towards removing fluoride from water. And again, this is something that scientifically goes back to, I'm thinking 50s or maybe 60s, maybe 1960s. But it makes me kind of question, like I said earlier, what is your motivation for doing this? And so, as of this morning, I think Utah was about to be the first state to pass legislation banning fluoride in water. And I feel like with our current, I guess, health cabinet leader or
Yeah.
whatever, I feel like we've heard about measles outbreaks. I had not heard about that since I was a kid. We heard the first death from measles happened in Texas earlier this week. First child to die from having measles, and so I feel like the anti-vax movement, and now, like I said, I hadn't heard of before, but the anti-fluoride in water movement. I'm pretty sure the American Dental Association is not behind that, but so I'm saying all that to say, I mean, you mentioned earlier about our allies versus our non-allies versus, historically things that have happened, but I don't even think we can couch what's currently going on in any of that because it's just so this I'm hoping this is a one-off, but in history up to this point it absolutely is. Whether you were pro or anti slavery, North versus South. You can go to any administration prior, and the one thing you will not be able to say is that you did not have a some level of a scholar in office.
Yeah.
Again, whether or not you agreed with, for example, trickle down economics, I think has been disproven over the generations. However, that does not mean that Ronald Reagan was not an intelligent person, was not a well-read person, because as we know, he was. So, and I just feel like this is the first time in history where you really have someone who flat out legit has no idea what they're doing. Kind of like in a cartoon, which way did it go, And it would be humorous, except that we're dealing with real lives and a real country and making enemies of real allies. And it's scary. I mean, if I'm being honest, it's scary.
Well, to kind of go off of that, I do think, as much as I don't think our current president is necessarily a scholar, I do think he knows exactly what he's doing.
Do you?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it just has to do with bringing, and I hate to be the person that sounds like a conspiracy theorist, but it just sounds like he's trying to bring all out. You would think it's like a terrorist or something. Like just the stuff that he is doing that makes absolutely no sense to the average person. And I had some stats that I'm going to bring up a little later, but even the people, the economy that was supposed to be the biggest thing that everybody voted for him this way, you're already seeing that starting to, I don't want to say tank the markets, but the markets are starting to adjust to these policies that he's passing that obviously has nothing to do with economics. And a lot of people were, hopeful of what he was going to do, but this, America's America, but when it comes to the rest of the world, America is not running everything. You still have to answer to India, you still have to answer to China. And they're not getting the same propaganda that we're getting here in America that's been kind of going on since the country's been founded. So when you look at a North Korea who is stealing billions or at least over $1 billion in cryptocurrency, they're not thinking, oh, we can't steal from America because they're the greatest country on earth. There are other countries that are willing to call us on our stuff, and you're already seeing that happen. So it's just, again, it's already playing itself out right under our nose. And I go to Bloomberg for quite a bit of basically all of my news because I know they're a trusted source and I've been following them for years. And you have opinion pieces and whatever, but when it comes to facts, it's not like Blaze or some of these other places that are obviously biased, even like a Fox or an MSNBC. They just give you the facts and you can take that for what it is. So when I go to these places like Bloomberg and they're saying, okay, consumer confidence is down, this is down based on this news, you kind of have to look and see, okay, so the economy was supposed to be this much better under President Trump, and first 100 days or so, not even 100 days, we're already seeing all this stuff unfold. So, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of crazy to me.
Well, I don't know. I know that we really haven't developed the audience that we'll have in the future. But I have to say, even with the audience that we have, people who tune in to kind of hear our opinions on things, I would have to say there probably is not a billionaire in our audience yet. So when you say the economy is not getting better, I have to push back a little because I feel like it's getting real good for billionaires. I think that if you look at the news stories that are coming out about, say, for example, Elon Musk and how many billions of dollars he's made just in the first 100 days of the Trump administration, just based on government contracts, that he has, and that is a huge conflict of interest. And coming from a space well below the top level of government in the United States, I can say that I've been discouraged from buying um, a coffee, and I'm not exaggerating, buying a coffee from someone who could potentially make a decision about grant funding that I was pursuing. A cup of coffee. But it's not a conflict of interest to have, multi-billion dollar contracts and everything. So it doesn't, when you say the economy is not getting better, the economy for the majority of Americans is not getting better. And I don't feel like it will. But then I don't think that was ever the point. Um, I've been hearing conversations kind of based on what you just said from people who, throughout the election cycle for the last national election, were very pro Trump for reasons stated the economy. And we don't want woke people taking over and, usurping the actual meaning and the actual beneficiaries of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we happen to know statistically. Um, I'll say African Americans because that's what the term the study used that I read are, I want to say fifth in terms of the percentages of people in the United States who have benefited from diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'll let you and your viewers go ahead and look up who the top four beneficiaries of DEI are. But it's not black people. So I'm just saying. I feel like this is by design. I do not think that we have a traditional. What I'm trying to say without being mean about it is I feel like we have somebody in the White House now who is all about being vindictive and nanny boo boo and I can do whatever I want and having temper tantrums and everything. So no, I don't think in the main scheme of things that person knows exactly what they're doing. I think they are on some levels bat poop crazy, and I think the people surrounding them pretending like they're not crazy are doing that for their own gain.
Yeah. And I think you are starting. I think that's really. And it's the same thing with Elon Musk, I feel. These people are billionaires. They are basically what the American success story is in terms of in the eyes of America. You know what I mean? They've made it, quote unquote.
Well, their parents made it, but
yeah. But they're in this own little field of they've done everything. They can buy whatever they want. Now, what else can I do? I still can't necessarily buy up a country, but at the same time, you kind of see with how the election cycle panned out, that some people can buy the election at least. So, like Elon Musk, he's put himself in this position where he feels like, okay, I spent all this money to make this man the president. now I have a power that no money could buy me. But what you're going to see is you really can't have it both ways, especially if you're not careful. And that's what I've been seeing recently when it comes to, I mean, EVs were going down anyway after the initial influx because they were the new thing. They were cool. They had all this technology. But a lot of your EV buyers are in California. And California's a more liberal state for whatever reason. So you're seeing those sales start to plummet. I just was looking at info about that this morning. So where you're gaining all this power as an Elon Musk in the government space, where you're supposed to be more lenient government, less government, you're already starting to see your private equity kind of come down in terms of your net worth because tech's looking kind of weird right now. Everything's looking a certain type of way because the president is doing things that aren't necessarily benefiting everybody, if that makes sense. I feel like when Biden was in power, especially for America, chip shortage, for example, every American can benefit from us having our chips made in America. If that makes the chips cheaper, more accessible, there was a shortage. If we're able to make more of them, we have more of them to power our computers. Obviously, that's going to benefit everyone, whether you're making a ton of money off of the chips or whether you don't have any money, but you're able to buy the chips cheaper for whatever you need it for. So you're seeing now where it's just becoming more and more difficult as an American to kind of stay in this bubble almost. I feel like, if that makes sense. So a lot of people are finally catching wind of what's going on. And going back to the whole EV thing, if you made your name, you've made your money off of this brand, and now this brand is starting to sink, everything else is kind of going to fall into place around that because people are saying, oh, he was this successful. What if all of a sudden he's not the richest man in the world and he goes down to number two? That's just going to trickle down. So I feel like they do need to be careful with that, specifically if you're Elon Musk. I feel like Trump still has a bit more power in the sense that if he does terribly, his followers will still be like, okay, this is because of Biden. This is because of Obama. This is because of this.
I
Whereas,
think up to a point. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, that's just my take on it.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of going in that same realm, I don't know if you know about the YouTuber Mr. Beast.
I do not know, but come on, you knew that before you asked me. Tell me about the YouTuber Mr. Beast.
Wow. Well, he's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, YouTuber on YouTube. He basically does this crazy stuff, and it's wild. It's actually kind of fun to watch. It's not really my cup of tea, but he'll do something where he did like a Squid Game kind of thing where he had all these people competing for this amount of money or whatever. I don't think they're necessarily like killing each other or whatever, but it's just he does stuff like that. It's really hilarious. But he went through a funding round here in the. I think he's getting ready to value his company at almost $5 billion. He's asking for like $200 million or whatever for this round of funding. He already has an Amazon series out, and I think it cost over $100 million just to produce it. And he's always kind of been on this this track of just spending every dollar that he makes to make more content, which I just find is interesting. But the series was very expensive. Amazon's already saying they're going to drop more series. But my question is, I guess, will the internet sensation, so your YouTubers, your people on Facebook, things of that nature, are they going to be the downfall of Hollywood, or do you think Hollywood's going to find a way to exploit them so that they stay in power?
Well, again, not knowing Mr. Beast, but kind of knowing the dynamics of social media, say an Issa Rae, for example, who started out, or even if you want to talk about music, a Kobe Calais, who started out on, I don't know how long, I don't know if that was MySpace, if it was that long ago,
Yeah.
but you can talk about celebrities who have kind of made it the non-traditional route. So when you look at things that way, social media absolutely has had a change in terms of made a change in terms of people being successful mainstream. I guess that's what I want to say. When it comes to Hollywood, though, I think that there will probably always be old Hollywood, kind of like old money, if that makes sense. But I feel like there is definitely space for, room for new school going to Hollywood and making their money and making names for themselves as well. I don't see it being. I don't see it being necessarily contentious. I think that when you zoom out and look at the arts, there probably is enough room for everyone. And I mean, what other culture can you look at that is more, I guess, open to new possibilities than, say, a Hollywood? Now, if you're talking about, for example, Oscars and,
Yeah.
Emmys and those types of things, that probably will take at least 20 years longer. We kind of stay behind that because you have to look at who in that space is actually making the decisions,
Yeah.
right? So it's not going to be the cutting edge. Hey, I've watched a couple episodes of Mr. Beast. It's going to be more people like me and older
Yeah.
who are like Mr. What, who. So it's going to take a while for that in terms of the accolades. But I do think in terms of just being part of the money making machine that is known as Hollywood, I think there's space. Yeah.
Well, you kind of put something in perspective for me. I remember in history books, we all know about the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and those people who just had so much. It wasn't even necessarily the money, but they just, in terms of real estate, in terms of assets, in terms of their name, in terms of what they did for their families, you had these people who were just the wealthiest of the wealthiest. And I guess my question today is, will there ever be an Elon Musk, for example, or Richard Branson? Will those ever be a Carnegie, a Rockefeller? Because I feel like it's so easy to make money these days. Like you could just go from zero to a billion, as opposed to the people who had $1 billion or billions and billions for 100 years. Even your Walton family. Do you think there'll ever be a family more like the Rockefellers or Carnegies that just kind of is that name that could basically own entire states if they wanted to?
Well, I feel like you touched on a couple of important categories, and one is wealth. And you said it yourself. You were like, well, not necessarily how much money, but how much real estate. And, so wealth is more than, obviously, we all know, more than just cash on hand. But then the other piece you touched on was legacy. And so when you look at legacy, that's a little bit different than being considered an overnight success. And personally, we've talked about this before. I don't, we say overnight success. That was because you saw them for the first time yesterday, and today they're a billionaire. We
Right.
don't really know how long, or how harried their journey may have been. I don't know that there'll ever be, for example, another Gilded Age in America. So, even though we are creating things at a faster clip than, say, railroads, for example,
Right.
or airplanes, aviation, whatever, um, because we're doing so quickly, I don't really think it's necessary to have that long of, I'll use aviation as an example. We don't need that long of a runway, to be able to take off if we're in Harriers, right? We're just going to go straight up,
Yeah.
and then that's that. And so I feel like in terms of that, I don't know that we'll ever see another generation that is. You didn't bring up like political families too, because
Yeah.
political families are starting to look different than they did, say, 30, 40 years ago.
True.
So that, I guess that's a long way of me saying no, I don't think that there will ever, but then again, like young people say, there's levels to this, right? So you do have to this day, you have your Rockefellers and Carnegies and just everyone else. But Richard Branson, if you look at a Richard Branson and whoever Mr. Beast is, I would have to say that they will never be on the same level. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, I feel like there will always be this hierarchy of my money's older than your money, or my family name is older than yours. But I just don't see us going back to I don't know, railroad barons and that type of thing. I don't.
Okay. Well, you brought up the aviation industry, and that kind of reminded me of something that we haven't gotten to talk about. But the Southwest plane, was it Midway, that almost hit that flex jet? We talked about this last week, and it's so crazy. I feel like the aviation industry has just had it rough past month, but honestly since COVID, because they had the issues there, then people started traveling again, and then it kind of stayed okay for a minute, and now people are starting to say I'm never getting on a plane because you're seeing all this video. They actually had the video of this Southwest jet almost running into this private plane, and shout out to that pilot who saw it from like a mile away because he saved a lot of money and a lot of lives there. So I kind of wanted to just touch on what do you think the issue was, because I heard the audio and it was under my impression that whoever was piloting the Flex jet repeated what he was supposed to do and then still didn't do it. So I guess a few points I want to touch on is, did this have anything to do with DEI, or is this just somebody wasn't listening, somebody was rushing? I don't know. So I don't know who the pilot was on the other plane. I just think there are so many things that people are trying to blame for certain issues, but at this point, I mean, what do you think was going on with that whole situation?
Well, first of all, I don't think that diversity, equity, or inclusion has anything to do with what happened um, at Midway Airport, which fortunately or unfortunately is an airport that I frequent and in the past month or so have flown in and out of at least 4 times.
Yeah.
So we have that, and then I see the report and I'm like, oh, sometimes it's not as bad as it seems. Then I see the video and I was like, oh crap, that was about as bad as it seems. The way I heard the information was the FlexJet actually repeated the wrong thing, the wrong information back to air traffic control, and that's why air traffic control was trying to correct them. At the same time, the Southwest plane was landing, so a lot of things were happening at the same time. And I agree with you, as well as the president, who said, great job, for Southwest pilots avoiding the tragedy and everything. But I have to imagine that before he pushed that statement out, he made sure somebody checked to make sure it wasn't a female or African American pilot. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
When I read it, I was like, oh shoot. Well, at least we know the ethnicity of the pilots now.
Yeah.
But I saw, I would say, a couple of. I remember our last meeting when you were saying, "Hey, is this more because we just have social media and we're seeing more things, or is this a more frequent happening in terms of near disasters or air disasters, whatever?" And I remember thinking at the time that there probably aren't more necessarily disasters going on. We're probably seeing more in real time, but it's also in how you are reporting things. Because, like I just mentioned, recently I was on a flight that had to do a fly around, and I would have to say, only because I've worked in flight in the past, I was one of the few people who knew, oh, we're having to do a fly around. And when the pilot came on, like I heard this Southwest pilot from the incident a couple days ago, when the pilot came over the PA, he was very calming and soothing, and that's their job. You know what I mean? You could have 2 seconds left,
Yeah.
and he's going to be trying to calm you down and everything. But, my husband, who is in the industry but has never worked in flight, he has different information. And so the whole time I'm like, wow, I'm looking out the window. We can't see anything. We've got zero visibility. We're 100% dependent on air traffic control. And now they're saying, I want to say the pilot said, we're going to have to go ahead and turn back around because there's a lot of traffic at Midway. Like we're on an interstate or something. Like, dude, you know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? This is not a traffic jam. But, not to get off topic, but it's kind of wild. But anyway, so I am on high alert when it comes to all things aviation right now. So the other morning, I'm going into my email and I see this story about this plane that I think they said it hit a bus and it exploded and all. And I'm like, oh crap, what's going on? Well, I look it up and it's a story from another country like 2 years ago or whatever. So that I thought about you in that moment too. Like, okay, so people are taking a theory and making it work. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
No matter how far back they have to go
Mm-hmm.
to try and find similar stories and everything. So, every day we live and learn. And I did think about you, and I was like, you know what? Maybe people are trying to, I don't know, exploit things that are always going on, things that go on every week in aviation, but now they're making a bigger story out of it than it actually would be. So,
Well, I think that's a good point because I think you see the same thing going on just with social media in general. Just when you think about the George Floyd situation and Black Lives Matter and why all this stuff has come about, it's always kind of been there, and it might have actually even been worse before we had video evidence of a lot of this stuff. But we're just seeing it now in person in 4K a lot of the times, and you're like, oh, this is crazy. But there are a lot of other instances where we don't have any evidence, we don't have anything to back up a story because there weren't cell phones everywhere, there weren't body cameras everywhere you look, there weren't dash cams everywhere or CCTV cameras watching everything, and you're thinking that it's just a dark alley, but you've got night vision cameras seeing this happen. So I think that is a lot of it, and I think it is kind of coincidental because obviously there haven't been as many deaths, at least that we've seen in media. And that was something else that I wanted to touch on a little bit. But you're just seeing these videos of these instances where, also with algorithms, YouTube and TikTok too, if one person's watching this and they're watching it 2 or 3 times, then TikTok is like, okay, let's go ahead and send this to all these other places. And I think that's why so many people have issues, why TikTok was almost banned, because there's so much stuff that you can't control. Where I think the government was over here saying, well, we don't want China to influence our elections or do this. But what you're really seeing is it's having the opposite effect where you can go out there and find your truth. And I think that's what a lot of our government officials and people in power are really worried about, because this is something that you cannot control. So we have all this media that we can basically take it for what it is or use it to push a whole other narrative. And with TikTok, that goes both ways. That's one of the few places that isn't either owned by Elon Musk or owned by Mark Zuckerberg or owned by Amazon. And when you really think about it, that's one of the reasons I think a lot of people are getting so upset with it going away, because if that is bought up by, let's say, a true social or something like that, you're really going to see lesser and lesser of the truth being shown. So I do find that to be very interesting in that aspect. But kind of going back to the media, and I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. The White House, I think it was yesterday. They made some interesting press changes for just the pool that they're going to allow in a lot of these settings with the president, where it used to just be Bloomberg, Associated Press, I think Reuters, and now you're having like Blaze Media, and then was it Newsmax being covering that along with Bloomberg, I think, for now. And it really has you thinking, and we've said this before, and it wasn't even like something that we held, at least me, I know you kind of had your own feeling about it, but the whole Hitler thing, and you're really starting to see this play out just a tad if you're paying attention, where he's literally limiting the media. And I try to stay kind of as central as I can in the middle with this, but it's just blatant that he's out here trying to push his narrative. And you're supposed to be the president of the United States. You're supposed to be the president for everybody. And you're over here putting these known, like worse than Fox News, conservative outlets at the forefront of what you're saying. And that really does show that you can't be trusted. So I kind of just wanted to get your input on that. I was trying to be neutral there, but it's really hard to do that in this situation.
that was a lot. First of all, you talked about buying up outlets and being able to say and do what you want because of the ownership of New York Times or whatever it is, Washington Post. But the reality is that once you've kind of sectioned off all of these conservatively led outlets, um, and everyone has either been fired or have stepped down because they really are more about, like you said, you like to be centrist, you like to have an open mind, so they're more about actual journalism than creating propaganda. And so people have, believe it or not, people still have their ethics and everything. And I don't think you can pay bills with it, but sometimes it's worth it to say, look, I know who my maker is or my creator or whatever, and I'm not about this life, so I'm not about to do that. But once we've done all of that, we still have people who are willing to share the truth as they know it and willing to share their opinion that may go against the opinion of the current regime. And there's a danger to that because there's more than one way to silence opinion. And what you said, I think you said it's showing that we can't trust this person. Well, if you've been paying attention, and there's no reason you would have been, but had you been paying attention, we knew back in the 1990s we couldn't trust this person. And they have not said or done anything to try and convince us that they're not the 1990s
Yep.
person taking out full page ads against people who have not even had a trial yet,
Yeah.
who eventually were exonerated of all charges anyway. Where there was never a full page ad for an apology, there was never a whispered apology. There was never an apology. This is that same person. They've never wavered. So, no, we can't trust them. We never could. But now they're surrounded by other people who clearly we can't trust, Um, so I'm saying all that to say that even with our platform, actually being able to step outside and say, hey, I don't agree with this. And I'm not even saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, as a United States taxpaying citizen, I don't agree with this. That should, at the very least, be everybody's right. And what I'm finding is, there are certain people who, I mean, Kyle Rittenhouse. You remember Kyle Rittenhouse, the guy who I guess he couldn't even drive, so his mama drove him a state or two away with a AR-15. Was it? I don't really
Mm-hmm.
know my weapons like that yet, but anyway, I believe it was an AR-15, and he ended up shooting protesters, and at least one or two of them I think died, and
Mm-hmm.
so he was tried, and then found not guilty or not responsible for their murders because it was in self defense. And I'm thinking, how do you take a trip to go somewhere to defend yourself? Like, that doesn't even, you could have just stayed at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I bringing this up? Because either yesterday or today, he was an invited guest. He had 30 minutes to speak at the University of Memphis. You have to ask yourself, why? You know what I mean? Like, nobody asked OJ to go around the colleges and speak once he got off. Like, don't play games with me. So all of this is by design. What you're trying to do is send dog whistles to people that, hey, perhaps you too could get away with this type of behavior, especially now. So nobody's stupid. And the local news outlet interviewed some students on campus, and it was a variety of students, right? It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just black students, white students, males, females. And without exception, the students were like, we don't know why he's here. Nobody, like, there were protests last time he came. We don't know why they keep beating this dead horse. Well, I think I do. And I think it's supposed to be a message sent out, kind of like back in the, Ku Klux Klan days. So,
Yeah.
they hang someone and they don't let, it's against the law for the families to go and cut the person down. And then the Klans people or whoever, they're false flagging as that day, pull the person down and drive them through the community so that the other community members can see, hey, if you step out of line, this could be you next. It's the same message. It's the exact same message.
Well, I think you made a lot of good points there, and that's rough. But speaking about messages, I don't know if you heard about the what is it, the Trump gold. I called it the gold card visa program, which I think that is what it's called, but it is kind of ironic. It's kind of like it just had Trump University all over it when I listened to it. But the $5 million green card basically, and he says you only get the best of the best uh, in America, paying this amount of money to have this card. And when I was listening to that, I just thought I literally laughed out loud because it is so, like we said earlier, this guy has never wavered from who he is. And as much as I don't want to say I can't stand it, I do find it very hypocritical. But just as somebody watching this, it really does give me the Apprentice vibes. And you're like, you know what? I see why people watch this show. This is just, it'd be hilarious if it weren't so sad and so scary because he's legit out here running the free world, still trying to sell stuff. And it's looking like I'm about to see his, however many bankruptcy he's had, 6, like I'm about to see his 7th. And it's going to be all on our dime. So I kind of just wanted to get your input on that, and what do you think that'll really do long term if it actually comes to fruition? Will people be coming from India and China like, yo, let me get this $5 million gold card? So I don't know what they're gonna do with it, but do you think it's actually going to be beneficial if it does come about?
Uh, no. No, I don't really. But but I will say this: if you are interested in furthering your education at Trump University, I get the feeling you'll have a chance to, because since the Department of Education is being eradicated and all of these consumer protection agencies
Mm-hmm.
are going away. I think it's only a matter of time before you start seeing, hey, remember Trump University? Well, they lied to you and said we were really cheating you out of your money. Come back. If you've never been, this can be your first time. Like, one of the things I've started to see on social media, on the platforms that I frequent, have to do with, well, we all got to stick together now. And yeah, we got fooled before the election, but we got to look out for each other. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm calling BS on that. Like, if you look historically at the people who have been discriminated against in this country, um, if you look at the gender that's been discriminated against most in this country, none of that has really changed. Now, I'm sorry if you didn't pay attention, and I'm sorry if for some reason someone got way more in your assessment, way more leadership points than another person based on their gender and their lack of a tan. Like, I don't know what it was that had you look at someone with a family, with no bankruptcies, with 2 or 3 elected offices under their belt. I don't know what made you look at that person and say somehow they couldn't possibly be qualified, but this individual somehow is qualified. Even with how many bankruptcies was it at the time? How many families was it at the time? How many almost would have been a family had I married your mama at the like? I don't understand how you make those distinctions. It's like I don't understand, but I kind of do understand. And so if you were that person 3 months ago, I have to imagine you're still that person. So, no, like I told you an episode or two ago, I don't even like eggs, but you can't have any of mine because you are not my friend. Now, if in 4 years we're all still here and you decide, I think this time I'll do the right thing, then if there are any eggs left, maybe I'll let you have one. But until that time, no, we're not friends. We're not cool because what you did, and I'll bring it home. I was looking at a colleague of mine just redecorated a room in their house. And they were showing, all because we're Facebook friends. They're showing everybody, look at what I did. It's so cool. And I'm squinting like, is that a Trump Vance poster? In like, this is a person. This is a person that every time I see them, it's give me a big hug. This is my girl. I love you. Blah blah blah. And from a business standpoint, I believe they will do anything. I believe if I went to their place of business today and said I need XYZ, they do it. Mm-hmm. So there's a disconnect between you are really crazy about me, and I'm sure you have friends and colleagues the same way. Mm-hmm. You're really crazy about me, you just don't care if I'm basically being come for by an entire government. Like I'm illegal because of what I look like. I'm not qualified because of what I look like. And you're sanctioning this by voting for this individual that's pushing that agenda. And you want to know when we can meet for coffee again. Like, dude,
Yeah.
I'm not asleep.
Yeah.
Now you don't have to call me woke if that makes you upset, but I can promise you I'm not asleep. So, saying all that to say, I don't really have a lot of empathy for people who it for people who believe in having rights as long as they're the only ones with the rights. They could not care less whether or not your rights are, being upheld or whatever, as long as they have rights. And the second they realize, oh my goodness, they meant me too. They meant my Medicare is going away too. They meant my kids can't go to Head Start either. Like once you realize that, now we teamed up. I don't think so. I'm on the same team that I've always been on. I've never wished any ill for anybody else. I believe there's enough for all of us. Um, I believe in everyone having rights, even people who behave in ways that I don't agree with or I wouldn't otherwise, myself. I believe in all of that. So that's what I guess they call really liberal or whatever. Um, but you don't get to switch it up, right? You don't get to be my enemy when it suits you and then flip around and expect me to believe you're my friend. Like that would make me not very bright, wouldn't it?
I agree. Yeah, that's I mean that's just a wild situation, I feel, cuz like you said, I know people that would do anything for me, and I'm over here thinking, how can you go this way? But I think a lot of people either subconsciously or consciously are telling themselves, "Hey, they're just crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. He's not going to do this. They're not talking about you. You're one of the good ones. You don't have to worry about anything." But it's one of those situations where if it's not you, eventually it will be you. And injustice against one person's a justice against everyone. So that's just my whole take on it. I did want to kind of go off that a little bit. Um, I don't know if you heard that Hooters is in a little bit of trouble. A lot of big companies have been in trouble here recently,
Yeah.
but they are apparently on the verge of bankruptcy. And I kind of wanted your, I guess it's really not on the same wavelength, honestly, but they're in big trouble. And I was kind of wondering, what do you think could be the cause of that? Is it DEI? Not everybody that's working at Hooters has Hooters. Is it maybe because we have OnlyFans now, so you're not going to drink out with your buddies to look at Hooters? Or is it just because chicken has become so freaking expensive? What are your thoughts?
I would like to take door number 3, please. I would, it could be anything you just named, but as an iconic institution, national, if not international. I know I've been to several states in the United States, and they had really vibrant Hooters restaurants. The food is good, the vibe is good. I personally am not, into looking at Hooters, but oftentimes I'm with people who are. So, I don't hate the player, I don't hate the game, but I would hope that it has more to do with the economy behind being able to, I guess, have a fair price or an affordable price for your customers, especially when your only or your primary um, offering is chicken. Like I'm really hoping that that's what it is.
Well, I think it might have to do with, like you said, pretty much all that I touched on. And it's sad, but it's also interesting how you've seen, especially with the internet age, so many companies that have kind of transitioned well. I'm thinking of Walmart, Target, just coming up with apps and things of that nature. But then you have places like Sears where they couldn't keep up and they basically got their door shut. And with Hooters, especially with the advent of DoorDash, and you're seeing this with Red Lobster and stuff too, I feel like a lot of the money was made on people going in and sitting down. You don't necessarily go to Red Lobster because they have the best crab legs on the planet. You go out there because you enjoy spending time with your family, and you'll run up a check. Everybody can get lemonade. There's markup in that. Everybody go ahead and get a brownie. There's markup in that. But you're starting to see, and also I feel like with the wait staff as well, so many people are taking themselves out of the workforce, and maybe somebody used to be a Hooters girl, and now they are doing OnlyFans, and those people who wanted to see her at Hooters are just watching her on OnlyFans. But then on top of that too, just with like we said earlier, consumer spending being down so much, the food is part of the reason that you go in there. You go in there to eat and look at the girls walking around. You go in there to eat and watch the TV. But now, with everything being so expensive, you can barely leave the house. And you can say what you will, Trump got the gas prices down. They're still fluctuating like they were under Biden. They ain't as high as they were
Who
under.
said Trump got the gas prices down? I'm sorry.
Well, you know, people always got an excuse for that.
Let me compose myself.
But I mean, that's just kind of it's just so weird how a place that I remember when I was little, and we had an instance where we went to that Hooters, and one of us said, "Look at all these hoochie mamas or whatever."
Ryan.
Yeah, so we were all there, and Hooters is still my spot. I love to go there when I can, but it's really just become so expensive to eat out, but also just to be out, just in terms of I have to go out in all this traffic. I got to go wait here, and then the wait staff is trash. The food a lot of the times is trash. We used to go to a place, and it was always good. Didn't matter what it was. If you went to Hooters over here, it was just as good as a Hooters over here. But now somebody bring you out some pink chicken wings, and they be like, oops. And then you mad you never go to another Hooters again. It's just, there's so much that's kind of gone into that, but especially with, I feel like the industry as a whole, especially when it comes to restaurants, it's just kind of fallen off because you can't find good help. The food's really expensive. The places are failing because no one's trying to go out anyway. You almost want to go to Hooters VR, just make your chicken wings at home and put the VR headset on and just watch the girls walk around, and it's just I feel bad for Hooters, but I hope they get out of this mess. But places where you have to go, even like WeWork and things of that nature, I just feel like it's dead because everything is online now.
It's different. I mean, I wouldn't say it's dead, but it's different. I never really thought about the whole Hooters situation and the way you just explained it, but I get it now. Again, I was thinking just strictly poultry because who would not want to go to a restaurant with big TVs and watch the game and watch the girls, and like, how can that get old? That's older than time, right? Like, who don't want to do that? But, I think about it for myself, even going to the movie theater back when everybody's TV was about, oh, yay, big. And so if you really wanted to see what was happening in a movie, you went to somebody's theater. And now we have homes with wall-to-wall, screening units and everything. And even the homes that don't have that, a close friend of mine really wants to see Wicked with me. Like, I think I'm the last person on the planet probably that hasn't seen Wicked. And so, but they wanted to go out and do this, that, and the other. And I'm like, okay, you had me at go out. I don't want to do that. But then I looked up how long the movie was, and I'm like, ooh. But if we watch it at my house, I can pause it and go to the restroom, for example. So yeah, I'll probably be watching Wicked at home. But until we talked about it, it didn't really occur to me. The last time I was at a theater was to see the latest Marvel movie. Help me, because I went with somebody else. But
I know what you're talking about.
Captain America.
Captain America, yeah.
It was really good. Like, I wouldn't have chosen it. It was a really good movie. But my point is, there was almost nobody in there. And I
went on the first day, didn't you?
I went on, it might have been, I think the first day was a Thursday if you went to IMAX. So I went the first Friday. I went on And I do like matinees and everything. So, but even with that, the theater is usually more populated when I go, because I'm strict matinee anyway. If I have to go at night, I don't want to do that. But there were maybe, I'm not exaggerating, maybe 5 families in there. So maybe a mom, a dad, and kid or whatever. Maybe a couple on a date.
Opening weekend. Sheesh.
That Friday, yeah. But again, I never put that together. I was happy because I'm kind of people averse, so I was like, okay, this I'm chilling. But now that you're saying that, what would happen if the industry went away because that was a trend? Do you know what I mean? And like I said, I live in a pretty populous area, so there is no reason that that theater wouldn't have been at least half full on the first Friday, even during the day. I remember seeing Fast and Furious. Like every time one of those franchise movies came out, I was there the first Friday. Sorry, ex-employers, but you know, at the matinee, and it was always packed.
Yeah.
So I just, again, you kind of put that on my radar that this might be a trend of places, industries just shutting down because of where we are, I guess, with technology.
Yeah, and I think culturally, it's so much easier. It used to be like you said, you could only go to see the new Marvel movie at the movie theater. But now you're starting to see you can get Wicked. I can turn on the computer, turn on the TV, turn on my phone, and be like, you know what? I don't feel like going to movies right now. I'm gonna just watch this while I'm at work. And like you said, I can pause it or watch it again or continue it while I'm on the toilet. Don't matter what. So I feel like that's a big thing for a lot of people. And you're seeing that with just how almost reclusive that we are as a culture. That's why you have a lot of these dating apps like Tinder, Bumble, even just what is it, Omegle, or whatever, when you can just meet people online. You used to not have any of this stuff, and now it's just so easy. I can probably get on with a friend right now on an iPad or whatever, and we can sit here and watch a movie together and then just be typing in the chat. You see it just with YouTube videos. I'll post a live premiere or something, and all my buddies are right there talking about, man, when you drove this car, that was crazy. And they're right there with me watching it. And it really makes it's a gift and a curse because, again, you can't just go out to the movies, have a good time. You have all this technology in front of you. A lot of the times you aren't even paying attention. I'll have something running while I'm doing the dishes, and people think I'm there, but I'm not. But it
I don't think you
takes.
should give all your trade secrets.
Well, it takes away the fun. I feel like in a lot of ways, but it also just makes it that much easier to do a lot of this stuff. Like I was on Fandango at home. I had to spend $60 past week because my kid wanted to see the new Sonic.
Oh.
Found out the new Sonic was on Paramount Plus. I already paid for that, so I didn't wasted $25. And for me though, especially with a toddler, as much as her mother would like to go out to the movies with her, it's a lot easier for me to be like, hey, let's sit here and watch this. And when you get bored or you get hungry or whatever, we can either pause it or you can walk out of the room. We're not interrupting everyone else's movie.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, it's a double-edged sword there. I like how they're kind of having the flexibility though. So if you want to go see a movie at the movie theater, you still can for now.
For now, yeah.
But if you want to see it at home, yeah, we'll charge the same amount of money as a movie ticket. So it also gives them more flexibility to get more customers. But at the same time, you might see it shift from one direction to the other. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with, say, someone like a Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast may not be in the movie theaters, but everyone has access to Mr. Beast if they have internet connection, if they have a cell phone. Whereas if you want to go see, and I wanted to kind of dive into this point here, if you want to go see a Gene Hackman movie, you can only go to the movies and then catch it on DVD. You couldn't just pull it up on YouTube, pull it out on your phone. But that's kind of where I wanted to end the day. I wanted to say rest in peace to Gene Hackman, his wife, even his dog. He was found dead, suspected carbon monoxide poisoning. But I kind of want to do almost like a celebration of his life because I know you're a huge Gene Hackman fan. And I've grown to love him as well over the years. Yeah. Some of his classic movies, one of my all-time favorites, probably top 5 favorite movies of all time, Mississippi Burning.
Yep.
That late 80s movie that came out, Willem Dafoe was in there. And what's the one with Will Smith, Enemy of the State?
Oh, Enemy of the State, that's a big one. Crimson Tide with Denzel, that you don't really see that often. I can't remember last time I've seen it, but interestingly, a lot of the work that Gene Hackman was, that he won Oscars for or whatever, those aren't even really my favorite roles of his. I think he was just an outstanding actor, and I can watch his movies over and over and
He's
over. I'm like,
timeless. Yeah.
oh my goodness, The Firm, even
Oh
the
yeah.
role he had in The Firm. So yeah, definitely condolences to him and his family. I think it's a huge loss. Even though he had not necessarily worked in the industry for a while, he's iconic. Um, and also, I guess, shout out to Roberta Flack. May she rest in
Yeah.
peace.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, someone who I grew up listening to because my mom was a huge fan of hers. And, as a child, I thought that stuff sounded kind of like nails on a blackboard, if anybody still knows what a blackboard is. But as I, became older and really started to understand even the lyrics and just appreciate her voice for the
Yeah.
different things it could do. Another huge loss. So
Yeah.
yeah, so again, just condolences to the families of Roberta Flack and Gene Hackman. Yeah.
Do you think there will ever be another? People always say this music sounds like trash, whatever. Back in my day, we did this. Back in my day, Do you think in today's day and age where it's so easy to, like, if I wanted to make a song right now, I could make one in 5 minutes. If I wanted to make a movie right now, I could do it with my phone. Do you think that we'll ever see talent like we've seen it in the past? Or do you think it almost evolves? Or do you think we'll see more talent because everybody who has this knack or this gift, they can put themselves out there as opposed to having gatekeepers?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think that talent is subjective in a lot of ways. I mean, I feel like if you have a chord and you have a singer who has like a 4 octave range or something like that, that's not deniable. Like, an average singer can't do that.
Right.
Auto tunes can be helpful, but you have your super talented, almost supernaturally talented person, and then you have your average people who sometimes they make straight bops. Like, you will never know what their voice really sounds like,
Yeah.
but the production for their music and everything is so good. So um I do not necessarily think that we'll ever have the range of talent that we've had in the past, but I don't think it's a genetic, thing. Or I feel like, for example, how many people do you know that can drive a manual transmission car?
Very few today.
In
Yeah.
the 50s,
That's all there was.
you know so I feel like it's the same thing. There are things that I don't do well because of the century that I'm living in, right?
Hmm.
So I don't darn socks. I throw them away and get some others. I don't even have. Remember the sewing cans that everybody had? It used to be a cookie
No.
tin, and then I mean, I had one briefly, but I realized that I don't have skills in that area. Um, but there's an entire generation that would not think of. Like, you knew if you saw a cookie tin at your grandmother's house,
Yeah.
unless it was in the kitchen. There wasn't cookies in there. It was needle, thread, the little thing you put on your finger so you don't stick your finger. And so I feel like, a lot of ways with talent, it's going to be like that. A Shirley Temple, like taking it way back, someone who could sing and act and dance. At a certain period in our artistic history, you had to do all it. Like, if you went in only knowing how to do one thing, you probably weren't going to get the role, and that's changed even. So it's funny. I don't know. You probably know Minnie Riperton, and for those of y'all who don't know it, please look up Minnie Riperton. Mariah Carey, my favorite living vocalist. And so I belong to this group, this Facebook group, and a lot of times they'll make comparisons, right? So they wanted to know in this particular comparison activity who had the best high pitched range or whatever. And they had Mariah, they had Minnie Riperton, which Mariah, that's my girl, but Minnie was Minnie. And then they had a couple other randos. I'm like, why are you even on here? But somebody brought up Shantae Moore,
Hmm.
which is a name a lot of people are not familiar with. But I've heard her live hit notes that I happen to know a lot of our popular singers of today couldn't hit if their lives depended on it. So I think I declined the I may have put. I think I liked other people's comments. Like I
Yeah.
could even because Mariah, that's my girl, and I could not go on there and say what I really thought was like Mariah. I think you hang the moon. But Minnie Riperton, she hit those notes. They were smooth like cognac. Like you can't even. so, but anyway, having said all that, do I think we'll ever have that level of talent again? I don't, and I don't know that we'll ever have that level of talent in acting. But as I say that, I think about younger actors who have come out, who are really really good. So I guess time will tell. I think that there are always going to be people who do everything they can to get as deep as they can get in their craft. And I'm not
Hmm.
just talking Hollywood or, music or anything. I'm talking about people who sell cars, people who make fries at McDonald's. Like you're always going to
Yeah.
have somebody that wants to be their best because they take pride in that. And then I feel like you'll always have somebody that's willing to take a shortcut. The difference now is that there are a lot of shortcuts that are available to us, whereas back in the day, not so much. So,
I think you make a good point, definitely. That kind of ties everything together with the shortcuts, but we're going to just leave it there. I want to thank y'all for watching another episode of I Only Ask Because. Dr. E and Tony, we'll catch you on the next one.